Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Primates in Space. Primates discover iron. And this, of course, controversial in how you would analyze this particular event or a series of events actually in the history of civilization and the primates getting crazy all over the planet. But it is likely everything that we've talked about up till now, the discovery of being able to create cities, writing, being able to live in larger communities, agriculture, all of this existed. And existed for, a couple of thousand years, actually, before the advent and widespread mastery of iron. But it is iron that sort of supercharges this. Iron takes everything that has happened and sort of just multiplies it. So it's like a general technology. It's not a specific technology. I mean, it is a specific thing, but it just applies to so many obvious and subtle and invisible things that it's almost hard to articulate clearly all of the impacts of mastering iron on the ability of civilizations, cities, empires, political elites, everything to multiply, to expand, to grow, to do more of what was already happening. And of course, this is one of those feedback loops that the more you do, the more you get, the more you get, the more you can do. And then, hey, presto, what was something that gives you a 25% advantage, just making up a number there, all of a sudden gives you over the course of a century or a millennia 100 times, a 100-fold advantage. And you can actually see this in the progress of human population on the planet. And so maybe I'll use this as the graph for this lecture. Actually, that's a good idea, or the image for this lecture. Because if you look at the human population on Earth, it is growing so slowly for so long that it's amazing because now that we're everywhere, we're the ants on the ant pile. We think, we've always been, everywhere. There's just always been, billions and billions. No, the human population was static, almost static, for millennia. And when you read one of the first moments where you really start to see that curve go up, agriculture helps a bit, and then iron. And then you hit the Industrial Revolution and it just goes crazy. But that's coming. But before the Industrial Revolution, you need iron. You need a couple other things too. But one of the key things you need is iron. And so this is why it's such an important development for taking everything the primates have come up with and like I said, it's a multiplier or a lever. It just lets you do the same thing better and new things that you couldn't do before. So what does it mean? Why is it important? And then what impact does it have on us today? By the way, it's one of the things that's just still everywhere. I mean, like agriculture and cities. Metal, iron and steel in its various guises, is so everywhere that we forget that it was developed. Like we forget that cities are a thing, right? Like that there used to not be cities. Used to be humans, but not cities. And then there were cities. And now we've just lived with cities for so long that it just seems like, cities are, like apples. They just occur out there in the wild. No, they don't. Well, they do occur, but they're not a product of genetics. Like they're a product of human, social, cultural evolution, not of natural. I guess, is that natural? Maybe we are natural, but we're surrounded by metal everywhere. Metal. And it's just shocking how important it is to our lives. Yet we don't think about it because it's just everywhere. And it's hard to think back to a time when metal just wasn't around, ubiquitous in our environment. So why is it important? Well, one, as we talked about, this ability of primates to pass knowledge on, and the way writing and cultural development and linguistic development allows you to expand the range and power and volume of knowledge that you can pass on, allows you to do increasingly sophisticated and complex tasks across time. And that the ability to select particular primates that are going to be your special friends, that you're going to spend more time with, allows you to create this chain that's not just familial. It's not just, a primate I'm related to, but it can be a friend primate. It can be just a primate that I like a lot and that we can work together and pass along knowledge. And so that just elementary primate capacity, that language and living in cities multiplied, is absolutely necessary for the development of iron, and development of iron and metalwork generally, again, reinforces and expands that, because you have to do all of these things. As bronze was around, but bronze is an interesting, is challenging in its own light. So I don't want to rubbish bronze, but the necessary ingredients of bronze, tin, and copper are fairly rare, but they occur in some places naturally, and the temperatures to utilize them are fairly low. And so it's just a lot easier to get at tin and copper. But when you get to iron, it's a whole different program. So here's just a few of the things you need to know how to do to be able to make use of iron. One, you have to have mining, when you have to identify what is iron, right? And you have to then how to get it out of there. So first you say, oh, look, this is the kind of dirt, iron ore. Well, I think, what is it called? Hematite, I believe is the right phrase. It has that sort of reddish, rusty look. Okay, now how do I get it out of there? Oh, you smelt it. The problem with smelting iron is you need furnaces that can go up to around 1,200 to 1,500 degrees Celsius, which is really, really hot. And that means you have to be able to use coal, right? And this is necessary. So you have to develop the capacity to use charcoal and the capacity to develop charcoal, because charcoal burns at a much higher temperature. You have to convert airflow. You have to create furnaces of various kinds. There's not one kind of furnace can do this. Different areas in history use slightly different kinds, but you basically have to do the same process to get this incredibly high temperature. So one of the interesting things, I'm always trying to figure this out, because you don't accidentally start a 1,300 degrees Celsius fire. Right, so it's almost necessary. I haven't been able to find any good arguments about this either, by the way, of why at some point somebody said, you know what, let's just see how hot we can get this thing going and see what happens when we put shit in that hot fire. They must have been doing this. Well, they're like research labs back in the ancient world. So you've got to have these incredibly hot fires. You've got to be able to control them, control airflow. You have to be able to control the way oxygen is mixed, because that'll mess up the process. You develop reduce oxide to metallic iron using carbon monoxide, right? So you have to feed back in actual chemicals. And to maintain the temperature, maintain the airflow, to get the right oxidation reduction balance, so that you actually get workable metallic iron. All of that. There's so many variables. Let's be clear. As you can probably tell from my attempt to articulate this, I don't understand the process at all. And I've lived surrounded by iron, because as we all have for my entire life, I have no idea how they do this or what's involved. But there's variables of air and temperature, and of course the chemical content, and needing to feed, carbon monoxide across the ore as it's smelting. And then once you get that, then you have to, work out, how do you work this? And now we've got this hot, molten, dangerous stuff. What do we do with it? And then how do we, harden it and temper it and create different alloys and different steels for different products? And then we turn it in, blah, 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 blah. So, dozens of variables. And of course, when you have dozens of variables feeding back across each other, you have all of these, this complexity. And you need to be able to refine and develop over time, which means you have to have the capacity to pass along all of these skills. And this isn't going to be one person, by the way. This is going to take quite a few people to be able to understand this process and to be able to affect it. So often iron might not be mined where it's being smelted. And so the smelters just know, hey, I need this kind of rock, and that guy over there can deliver it. And that guy is a merchant who gets it from someplace else. He doesn't know how to dig it up. He doesn't know how they get that, but they just know that it's there, and then they have someone who runs the mine, right? And so you start developing these wholesale networks of trade, of knowledge sharing, knowledge training, passing along the information on how things are made, the recipes for making them, the processes, which are going to be super valuable and hence probably often protected by, all kinds of state secrecy. So it's going to be a highly specialized group of people who know how to do this and unbelievably valuable. So it takes generations to develop this technology because it's not a one thing. You have to mine the ore, you have to refine the ore, you have to know how to make the fire hot enough, which means you have to understand how charcoal works, which means you have to understand how you're taking hardwoods to make charcoal, which burns really much hotter. You have airflow, you have the chemistry that's involved. It goes on and on. And so a lot of social infrastructure has to be developed that allows you to then master and sustain the working of this magic technology. Now, why? What on earth could be so valuable about iron that it would allow you to actually go through this process? Well, once you get it, by the way, we're talking about the earliest iron work of small scale that we see some evidence of is probably about 3,000 years ago or something like this. And this is somewhat distinct from meteoric iron, because iron would fall from the sky, which is kind of cool. And then people would find it, and they knew a certain degree how to heat and work it. So it's possible that this was the sort of trigger to allow people to begin thinking about using iron, because they kind of found, moderately pre-smelted iron falls in meteorites. You find it, you go, wow, this is an amazing material. What can we do with it? Oh, if you get it really hot, you can melt it and work it, right? And so this may have been like an easy gateway into going, oh, hey, that's actually, that red rock over there is the same stuff. Maybe if we heat that, and this got the ball rolling. But with the possible exception of meteoric iron, I believe, iron from meteorites, what you have is about 3,000 years ago, the Egyptians were doing some early experimentation, but it's really about 1,000 years ago, or 1,000 BCE. I'm sorry, so about 1,000 BCE. So it was 3,000 BCE for the Egyptians, about 1,000 BCE for all sort of the global, except for the New World, that never developed it. The global impact of iron really starts to shift. And by the way, iron was developed independently, probably in India, in China, in Africa, and in the Middle Near East, Eurasian area, right? Because, once you get it in like around Egypt, you can see that it would spread quickly, but the archaeological record isn't perfectly clear, so we don't know exactly when, but probably iron smelting and working was developed independently at least 3 or 4 times, maybe more. So that's kind of amazing in itself. So about 5,000 years ago in Egypt, and then generally it spread all over the place, not the New World, about, say 1,000, just rounding out 1,000 BCE, so about 3,500 years ago, which is to say it's relatively new, because by this point you've had, cities and widespread agriculture for millennia, for, let's just call it, prick your starting date, so let's just call it 5,000 years. So for 5,000 years, you've had cities, you've had agriculture, you've had all of these elements that we've been talking about, or many of the elements we've been talking about are going, they're running concerns. But then about 1,000 BCE, you get this switch, this change. You get this change in technology. By the way, it's so recent that if you look at a poem like the Iliad, the Odyssey, it's clear that there's passages in there that are blurring this line, that it's primarily sort of a Bronze Age civilization narrative, but then you get iron in there, right? So it is not an entirely historically accurate narrative, because it's being told retrospectively, remembering the Bronze Age from a time that is no longer the Bronze Age. So we know that what's being recounted was an actual war, which takes place right at the cusp, right? So right around 1200 BCE. But the composition of the Iliad takes place, checks his notes in the top of his head and goes, let's go 800 BC? Yeah, I think it's 800 is when the composition is generally considered of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. So it actually crosses that span. So that's how recent it is that we still have narrative epic poetry that recounts from human memory this transition and it expresses that transition. So in an important way. So we're talking a fairly recent evolution in the development of human civilization. So what impact does this have? So again, this is about 1200. By 500 BCE, another way to think about this is iron is dominant just about everywhere. I mean, we're still using bronze and copper and other things, right? But iron, for anything's important, iron. This is what it's all about. And you start seeing that uptick in human population, which suggests something has happened. And one of the things that's happened, of course, is the application of iron to every possible problem. So why does this matter so much? So we've got it. It's this incredibly complex and difficult to master technology. Takes a couple of thousand years, maybe 1,000 years to get it really under control. And then about 1,000 BC, it's rolling. And then by 500 BC, it's really starting to change everything. One, and maybe most importantly, which is most important, I don't know, you can argue, but certainly one of the most important ones is it allows you to work the soil more effectively, to turn soil more deeply, and to clear more land that you can then convert to agriculture. So you're already doing agriculture, or you're already trying to do intensive agriculture in much of the world. This allows you to do the agriculture you're already doing better and to do more of it. And so, if you're producing, I tried to find some numbers on what the actual statistical, improvement is, but it's so variable because it depends on the type of soil you're doing, the kind of agriculture you're doing, the seasonality, the types, are you doing rice? Are you doing corn? Are you not corn because that would be the new world? Are you doing wheat? Are you doing, right? So it's just so dependent. It's hard to come up with, but it's probably as much as a 2xer and maybe even more. So on the land you had, if you were able to feed a city of, say, 10,000, without expanding your land base, you can now feed a city of 20,000. And again, it allowed you to bring more land into production. So it allowed both greater population densities, it allowed more production from the land you had, and it allowed you to bring more agricultural production, more land into production. So just, that was extraordinary. In itself, it made it possible, right? If you don't have that increase in food density, then you just really don't have an opportunity to expand your civilization base and make cities go. And then the technology and cultural division within cities and specialization becomes more viable because you have more people. And here we go. Second example of this is if you think about like a hardwood forest in much of Europe, and this is why people, why is then, the Middle Near East, Mesopotamia, why is this a cradle of civilization? One reason is because it's not covered with hardwood forests. The problem with hardwood forests is without iron, you can't economically clear trees. Because and you can try this yourself at home, get yourself a bronze axe and go try to cut down an oak tree. Or a less expensive and aggressive way of doing this is get a piece of like oak firewood and get like a bronze letter opener, which is the way I ran this experiment many years ago, and see what you can do to that piece of oak with that bronze letter opener. And I can tell you what it is. It's not very much. The oak wins. I mean, it's amazing how hard oak is compared to bronze, even pretty nice bronze, even modern world bronze, right? And it's like, oh my goodness, this is not going to be fun. And so functionally, you just couldn't clear hardwood forests. Now, it's not that you couldn't do anything. It just makes it really, really difficult, time-consuming, and uneconomic, which is why the special culture that developed in the hardwood hardwood forests area of Europe, Central Asia, any area that's covered in hardwood forests is very different because they tend to be clearing based, natural clearings. They tended to do some grazing in those clearings. It's it's just a very different sort of base, but you could not have those incredible population densities until you get iron. Once you get iron, oh my goodness, now you can clear land, number one. Number two, it makes the wood available. And now these really aggressive hardwoods are great for all kinds of things like shipbuilding. And so not only does it make it easier to build ships, which are, themselves a fascinating technology, but it makes it possible to use better woods or wood that are more suited for it, and different kinds of ships because you have the iron to work that wood. And if, again, trying to make beams and things with bronze, it's not going to be fun. But with iron, you can absolutely do this. All of a sudden, you can mill beams, you can cut down bigger trees, you can start to clear forests. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that deforestation is one of the things that you can use to track the development of iron, because you're like, hey, we can cut down these trees, which also provides fuel, which, again, before the advent of oil, which will be coming up here in a couple of episodes, heat and generating heat for things like, let's say working iron is one of those really difficult social problems that it's hard to solve. Like, you want to cook bronze, you want to smelt iron, you want to do all kinds of things. Heat is good in the winter. How do you get heat? Well, you get it from wood. This is the answer from people who have iron. If you don't have iron, you're like, you know what? You got to just like collect branches and things. You got to hope for a tree to fall. And it's tricky. It's a lot of work. And so it changes the entire social structure of, what would we call the Goths, the Visigoths, all the barbarians, as the Romans would talk about them. But these are the civilizations. These are the social groupings that are developing because iron is passing into the peoples who are inhabiting these worlds, and now they can transform their civilizations. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of literature from that transformation, but we do have archaeological records of this, and it's perfectly clear this is when their populations start to boom, is because, we're in these relatively fertile, relatively habitable and friendly environments, but we just have to live around the trees because we can't do much about them. I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's just not economical to do a lot. Once you get iron, say 500 BCE-ish, depending on where you are, just your opportunities abound. And again, once you start clearing, now you have bigger pasture land, you have more land that you can farm, population density increases. And so it is not unrelated that about, a couple of centuries later, the Vikings are out looking for places to conquer because their population is starting to boom. Because they've had this capacity for the first time to really expand and to be able to sustain larger populations. So when you look at like forested land, again, for shipbuilding, so it allows you to build better ships that can go longer and carry more, and this technology of shipbuilding development, which reinforces all these elements of technological and cultural effusion that we've been talking about, which, accelerates this whole process. Also, it elaborates tool use of all kinds. So, just wander into a hardware store and look at how many iron tools are. Functionally, those all existed 500 BCE. They were drilling things, they were carving wood, they were cutting stone, they were chipping stone, they were making pipes, they were just doing everything. And so the technological, educational, I don't know how you want to think about this, the capacity and need to diffuse knowledge over time and generations just exploded. And the benefits, and we get down to one of the more downsides of this, the benefits of being able to successfully do that, say perhaps in the realm of military technology, started to ramify. So that if you had control of iron and supplies of iron, if you're fighting people with bronze weapons and you have iron weapons, give or take, you're going to win much of the time. So again, if you go back to the Iliad, where they're throwing spears that are just piercing shields and killing people, right? Like they were talking about the layers of copper or the layer of bronze and the spear tips and all of this. And you realize like, oh, like this is almost a recounting of it's like, oh, ho, ho, look at me. I've got, leather armor. And it's like, oh, ho, ho, look at me. I've got a very sharp piece of iron, right? Your leather armor is just not going to help in any way. And you actually get these descriptions of the armor technology and then its variability of helpfulness in the Iliad. And you realize like, oh, this is just this confusion of generations of like war fighting gear and the recognition that, man, once you get iron, this is great, right? Like this just, if you have it, it's great. If you don't have it, it is ungreat. And so you get this, sort of the political, socio-military, technological, industrial complex that we feel is so much a part of the modern world. Like, you fight wars, you got to have money to fight war, and you have the technology to beat your enemies, and you have to have the trade land to keep you supplied with the stuff that you need with the technology to defeat your enemies. And wow, when you look at the origin and development and spread of iron, you're like, oh, well, that's been around for whatever that is, 2,500 to 3,000 years. Because the trade routes that were developed to bring all that technology and materials together to smelt iron were extensive. Once iron spreads, you find iron. The nice thing about iron smelting is it leaves very good archaeological record. So, you may not know exactly what they were doing. You may not know exactly how they did it, but you do know they were doing it there because, man, there's a lot of smudgy iron stuff left, right? All the cast off and broken kilns and things tend to hold up really well over time. And so there tends to be a lot of evidence for it. And you're like, wow. So what we consider to be a very modern, the modern military, industrial technology, research industry, if it's strongly associated with all those elements, you can trade right back to the iron, the development, mastery, and diffusion of iron and its technology. Final step, or another element of this is, of course, the economic element of this. Again, now you've got larger population bases. You have greater capacity to exploit land. You can move into land that you didn't want anything to do with because you couldn't farm it before. Oh, now you can farm it. You move into, you have better ships with better put together more effectively. So now you can have longer trade routes. Okay, now map making, communications, we want the basic materials. We want access to iron mines. We want access to all of the raw ingredients that we need to keep this going and to feed our cities. And it's like, okay, here we go. Things like excavating for canal projects becomes more efficient because, of course, using iron digging tools better than wood digging tool, right? Better than stone digging tool. Iron, by 500 BCE, the shovel exists. We just don't think of the shovel as being this incredible piece of technology, but it is really, really an amazing, you can dig so deep, so quickly, so effectively, and a nice steel shovel is just an extraordinary multiplier of human capacity. But again, like with the bronze and hardwood, don't take my word for it. Just, go out with a piece of rock and try to dig a hole and see how far, just dig a 3 foot by 3 foot hole. Just not, just cubic meter. That's not too much. It's not a big hole relative to a canal or a roadbed or anything else, but just do it with a rock on your bare hands and then do it with a shovel. And what you realize is a shovel is, it's like a miracle, right? It's like it's a technology from the aliens and the future. But again, we're just so used to it. It's so embedded into every aspect of our lives that we've lost our feel for the spectacular transformation this represented when it was developed. And so all of the aspects that both accelerate and sort of drive the monkeys mad, both, right? Like this is where we're arriving. Iron just runs with it. So if we go back to our primate base, we do struggle living with large populations, and iron makes it possible for us to have even larger populations. We do struggle with knowing what to do with primates that we don't think of as being members of our tribe. And now iron means that we're going to sail further, have more contact, have longer trade lines. The world is getting bigger and bigger. And so our primate imaginations expand. At the same time, our primate desire to live in a narrow, confined, controlled environment with a few other primates diminishes. And that our ability to form groups is there. But once you get these powerful armies that need to be formed and to deploy iron in big groups, and with the Assyrians and Hittites, it gets exploited and turned to these weird and not very primate-friendly forms. But that's okay, because now the hierarchical tendency that we already have and our imaginative capacity to create narratives, now we can associate our king with a god, and that god wants us to go march over there with 1,000 other primates who we may or may not know with strong pointy sticks and go kill those other primates. And we're territorial by nature, and so we can kind of extrapolate our territoriality onto this abstract land of, they're of the foreign tribe, and they're not part of our land, and they're trying to impinge on our hunting grounds, which aren't hunting grounds at all, but are in fact intensively agricultural and canal-fed, process that has nothing to do with what primates were doing, and yet somehow it kind of overlaps and kind of doesn't overlap, right? It's that great tension that is at the core of what the whole lecture series is about. And so here is one of the first accelerators, I would say. All the components that we've been developing up to now added together to make the modern city with the food base and record keeping and the bureaucrats and specialization and God and economy and trade possible. So you get all that together, and then you just feed it iron. And that, both the necessity of working it and what working it allows you to achieve, those two things together just, launch the primates. Like, here we go. And when I start with primates in space, one of the things is steel takes you to space. Those rockets are built with a lot of steel. That's how, so think in some ways it's just extraordinary. At least to me, it kind of blows my mind to think about, is that a technology that was developed, say 2,500, 3,000 years ago, was an absolutely key element to putting to getting our monkeys in space. That's how little progress we've made. Right? It's certainly better steel, lighter steel, more efficient, more everything about it is better, but functionally, fundamentally, it's what we had developed 3,000 years ago that we're still working with, still mastering, still learning about, still applying, because we can't live without it now. We can't put the monkey in space without the steel. And that is, when you think about this, it's just extraordinary. All of these elements are still here. People talk, advancing in civilization and modernization and all this stuff. Yeah, in some ways, but no in other ways. Like, so much of this is, millennia and millennia years old, including iron. We're talking about thousands and thousands of years. And so while we have been making progress, and there are these leaps, iron being one of them, we tend not to evolve out of them. We tend to build on them. And so now our primates find themselves in a place where all of those elements that allowed us to develop civilization are multiplied. And if you look at the graph of human population growth, agriculture is definitely a bump, but iron applied to agriculture and the developments around that, now we're really getting rolling, and the modern world is underway. So primates discover iron. Thank you very much.